Hey everybody, this is Perch. A lot of comparisons get made. You notice that in comics, when you see a lot of these videos and you hear a lot of commentary, people make comparisons between the 70s, 80s, 90s, and today. But you don't usually get a different comparison, which is the 2000s to today. So this viewer writes in, says, Dear Perch, Perch is in brackets for some reason. It says, I would like to discuss how Marvel and DC in the 2000s introduced new and diverse characters, such as the Young Avengers, Runaways, and John's Teen Titans. These characters were based on existing ones, but were not simply replacements, alterations, or retcons, unlike what has been happening in the last 8 years. The aforementioned characters from these teams are prime examples of how the comic industry expanded its representation in a more organic and creative manner. When I first read these titles, as they were released and I was in my 20s, I thoroughly enjoyed them and did not perceive them as pandering. Today, however, it seems like some of the new releases are more explicitly focused on conveying a message or promoting a specific agenda. This approach differs from the earlier, more subtle methods of creating inclusive characters and storylines. Thank you for your time. It says, P.S. I used our new best friend ChatGPT to rewrite this email. You bastard, you did it to me. Okay, so I think, we often go back to the 90s, and then there's a lot of, basically arguments settle in with that time period and everything else. But I like this. I like what's done here, because I made the comment about Young Avengers before, in that it introduced some gay characters, Wiccan and Hulkling, and the characters felt very organic. They felt very natural. Same thing with Midnighter and Apollo. Same thing with several characters. You mentioned Runaways, and Runaways felt like teens in a superhero comic that were, I don't know, natural, normal. They actually felt like teens. Like the situation of, hey, our parents are part of a supervillain kind of thing, and they get themselves a dog. It felt correct. It felt normal. The Teen Titans adventures also felt good. The going back a little bit to Young Justice also worked, but really, if you just look at kind of Titans, you look at Runaways, you look like Young Avengers. Young Avengers, the stakes seem pretty high in that comic. You add, a Kang in there. You add some big things, and even though the adventures were appropriate for the characters, stopping and mugging and other things, it felt significant to the Marvel universe. It did feel very natural, and it also felt diverse. In fact, if I closed my eyes and I thought, what would be the best way to live up to the potential or live up to the promise of diversity and representation and inclusion, I feel like Young Avengers, Runaways, several of these comics did a great job with that. They felt like they both represented different types of characters, different type. It felt good, but as you write in the mail, I didn't feel like I was being pandered to. It never felt like I was being sold a comic, with the kind of capital D diversity, but instead I was given a comic that just had those elements, and it was a good read. I've recommended the Young Avengers and Runaways to a lot of people. The Runaways is one of the comics I recommended to my wife early on, of like, hey, this is kind of a different, kind of unique type of storytelling. But the funny thing is, I've met people who didn't like those comics, who just tried Runaways and didn't like it. And they didn't like it, but they didn't feel like it was insulting. Does that make any sense? Like, it's not like they read it and said, this comic it panders to me. It tries to, it felt normal. It felt natural. Even though it wasn't some people's cup of tea, it was a good comic. And I think there's a major difference, certainly, between the two eras. And the only thing I can kind of come down to is whether you like the story of Young Avengers, I'm talking the original, or Runaways, there was a story. There was a clear kind of plot that was being followed. Runaways could be summed up as, some kids discover that their parents are part of a, villain organization, and up to no good. They feel like they need to do something about it. And they feel like the situation is so dire, so bad, they got to get away. And, adventures follow. Young Avengers, some, characters who are clearly too young get pulled together through a variety of circumstances to, fight various types of crime and get sucked into a bigger and bigger adventure. There's a mission and there's a guiding story through these things that really felt like a natural comic with younger characters. If I contrast that to, even the Champions. So I was thinking about this. Mark Waid was writing The Avengers coming out of Secret Wars. And there was this idea that the Avengers title he was writing would have a mix of older and younger characters. And they did this weird thing where the Vision was being dodgy or was he? And, you've got the Falcon, who's a new Captain America trying to lead. You have Iron Man in there. You have, Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan. But Kamala Khan was written like she was some kind of fangirl, then turned into a drill sergeant. By the way, as an aside, it would be a whole separate video of its own. I think the big two do not know how to write leaders. What I mean by that is whenever a character is a leader, they immediately turn into this weird drill sergeant. They did it with Sam Wilson Falcon. They did it with Kamala Khan Miss Marvel. They did it with, Carol Danvers Captain Marvel. They always hell, even the Black Panther, when the Black Panther was leading the Avengers, suddenly the Black Panther is like, on your six. It's like every time it just sounds totally phony. But anyway, different video. But then they had this split. Basically, the younger characters in the Avengers decided, hey, we're not doing enough, and they go out and they become the Champions. And so it's a new kind of teen, younger kid comic. And I don't think this is the worst example by any stretch of the imagination of how this all played out. But one difference between the Champions and kind of its mission and how it rolled out versus Young Avengers or Runaways is the Champions was filled with a lot of self-importance, a lot of patting itself on the back, a lot of we're going to do what the adults can't do. And it's like a lot of almost slogans. It was, in effect, a slogan comic. It was a performance comic. It was, the adults won't take care of the common people, so we're going to take care of common people. Whereas in Runaways, they just had adventures that naturally let them take care of, quote unquote, the common people. It was just normal. The adventures just happened. And as a result, it was better. The comics, a lot of the kind of the younger titles, the titles that are really trying to sell diversity, do so with a chip on its shoulder. It's like, hey, we're doing this important thing. Pay attention to this comic because this comic is important. This important stuff happens in this comic, guys. Important. That's how the comic is sold. That's how it is read. And this isn't just a, hey, you're being influenced by, people's commentary and other things. Pick up Champions #1. Pick up Young Avengers. Pick up, this recent Dark Crisis was a Young Justice book and read it. Just try it. You'll find that these newer books are filled with an insecurity that comes across in the page, a constant need to remind readers and remind everybody of its own importance. And as a result, it doesn't ring true. And this has been true forever, by the way. If you look at any kind of TV, any kind of media where the comic is trying to appeal to kids, whenever it goes down the path of just, again, being very self-important, being very what we're doing is really matters, guys. It really, really matters. Whenever they do that, the comic suffers, and it suffers in a big way. It feels hollow. It is the Poochie effect in The Simpsons. It is, we're going to introduce this new character. That is for you. It's cool. It is what you want. It is what we know. We know this is what you're asking for, and we're going to make sure you understand it. Always a failure. Every time. So anyway, interesting mail. Thank you very much. Thank you, ChatGPT, for helping write it all up. But I think that, there's a major difference. Everybody goes back to the 90s, everybody goes back to the 80s. Go back to the 2000s and just compare. And sure enough, that it's a real clear comparison. Anyway, thank you for the mail. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and thanks for listening.